Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are talking about how to stop that awful sinking feeling of loneliness that most of us will experience at some point in our life. Now, loneliness is on the increase amongst the general population, but it's not just because of isolation caused by the pandemic. There is something deeper going on here. Well, in this teaching, we'll be discussing the real causes of loneliness, what you can do to best manage your feelings of loneliness, and how you can develop a more fulfilling and lasting relationship with yourself and other people. Okay, David, so how common is this issue of loneliness amongst the clients that you work with?
Actually, Alex, it's quite common, and I think it's one of the most challenging subjects that we have to discuss. And one of the first things that I want you to think about as we discuss this subject and we delve much deeper into it is when you talk about loneliness, are you describing a feeling or are you describing a state of mind? And I think this is where the Wu Wei Wisdom model can really help you. Because most people, and I think you said in the introduction, they'll say, I feel lonely. I've got this feeling, this emptiness inside of me, this heaviness as in my stomach. And I think what helps them the most is when they understand, well, I'm creating that feeling that I'm now giving the label of loneliness to. Then the next question is, let's do the golden thread process. Let's find out what are the beliefs and the thoughts that are giving you that feeling, because that's where the real work and the real changes can be made in what you think and what you believe.
So, when you've done your golden thread process work, which is your therapy model that you use with all your clients, they may come to you with feelings of loneliness or describing feelings of loneliness, but you say you then work to find out what the thoughts and beliefs. And so what are they most commonly with the clients that you work with?
Well, as you said in your introduction, it's been heightened over the last 18 months with the pandemic, and people have been physically locked down and been physically unable to make human contact. And I think that's very important for human beings. We are very social creatures. And so we need that social contact. And I think it's been very heightened and brought to the surface now over the last 18 months. But in general, it can be something like a loss of a lifetime partner. I find working with clients, this is the most challenging for us to sort out. You've been with a partner for probably the majority of your life, and the partner is deceased or left you, and you're on your own for the first time. And I think it's that belief that you can't cope on your own, you need someone there, you miss them around you, you miss their company, you miss their banter and their input, you miss seeing them. And so it's that readjustment that creates this feeling. And then you give the name, the label to the feeling of loneliness. It could be moving to a new area, for instance, moving jobs and moving away from your circle of friends and acquaintances. And then you have to do some effort to make a new circle of friends and acquaintances. And for some people that they think that and believe that could be difficult, or that they would be judged, or they don't mix in, or they're from a different country, or they have a different dialect, or they have to learn a new language. I know for me, when I moved to China, this was really difficult. It would have been very easy for me to sit in my room and not going to have to socialize and to try and learn a language with a different culture, different people coming from a different background. And I can remember that some days I almost had to force myself to go out, because it would be so-called easier to sit in my room and just be with myself. So it can be things like that. It can be when circumstances changed and the circumstances that you know to be normal is now not normal. And then the tendency of the part of the mind, and as we delve deep, you see the inner child will be involved. We label the inner child. It now becomes not familiar. And as you know, in all of our teachings, the inner child really resists anything that is not familiar. So what the inner child will do is to close down and produce a red light feeling that you may be calling loneliness or emptiness or isolation or abandonment. All of these are the same type of things.
And what about, I know some people complain that, who are in relationships and have partners and have physical company with partners or friends, but they still have a pervasive sense of inner loneliness. What's going on there?
Well, again, it's going to be difficult to answer that question directly because each one will have a different set of circumstances. That's why it's important to do the golden thread process and see what is actually going on, not just stay at the emotional feelings level, but to go down to find out what the belief and what the problems are. So it could be, I would give you the number one, it could be the lack of in communication within the relationship. So although you're in a relationship, married or committed, you're living together, sleeping together, eating together, on that communication level, that communication is not happening. And so therefore, what your mind has done is to shut yourself down. And that really is what's happening here as a general rule. Is you've moved in or something is happening that you don't like, the something is new, it's a new situation, and what your mind has done is to shut down to so-called protect yourself. And we've done many teachings on this because what your inner child has convinced you is if you shut down, if you isolate yourself, if you keep yourself safe, you can be protected from emotions. But of course that doesn't work. Because you're creating emotion, and then you create the emotion of loneliness, abandonment, isolation. So you're just creating another red light emotion.
So I can see what you're saying there is that for some people, they perhaps make their red light feelings worse because they are choosing to kind of shut down. They're choosing to go in on themselves, or they're choosing not to reach out for some of the reasons that you've already explained. So I can see that loneliness is a kind of a natural emotion because we're social creatures, but I think to have a loneliness long term, really strong sense of feelings of loneliness, it's almost like, would you say that we may be exacerbating the problem by how we then manage our practical situation?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Alex. And I think this is where the Wu Wei Wisdom model can help you. Because if you focus on the emotion, the feeling, the physical sensation, the physical experience of loneliness, abandonment, and isolation, what you'll do is you'll shut down and protect yourself as even more. And the personal example I gave was when I was living in China, to go out into an environment where I didn't speak the language, where I was the odd one out, being tall, being white, not understanding the culture. And it almost, I had to force myself out into that environment. And then, well, it's no surprise, is it? Some of my best friends I know now from 30, 40 years ago are Chinese, and they help me. And the law of attraction, when they see me struggling, I can remember one time when I was really hungry and trying to go to a restaurant and this was the time before Google Translate and all of these modern things. And the waiter looked at me as though I just walked from the planet Zog and gave me a menu all in Chinese. And I'm a vegetarian as well, so I didn't know what to say. And then out of the blue, this person said in perfect English, "Can I help you?" And I explained my situation, and he ordered the meal, and we shared the meal together, and he became a friend. So sometimes you have to push back through that feeling, and remember that you are creating the feeling. And I said at the beginning, this is why you'll see the Wu Wei Wisdom model can give you a kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. So I recognize I'm creating this feeling. I could have stayed at home and starved to death, or I can go out and push myself. And you sometimes have to go through the feeling, and then the part of your mind that we call the inner child then becomes, the new environment becomes more familiar. And then now I'd be quite happy to walk into any place, enjoy that I don't speak well, and be able to have banter with them and laugh and joke and point. And have you ever done that in restaurants? Go around the table and point at other tables. So, and then you start to create feelings of more comfortableness, more at ease. And then you'll find then that feeling that you've created, that you've called loneliness, just disappears. And now you're more in a group and you attract. So this is why it's so important. This is a very important subject. And why it's difficult to talk about it, Alex, is because for everyone, it'll be slightly different.
And the circumstances are very personal.
It is very personal stuff. Yes.
Because obviously, if you've lost a loved one that you've been with potentially for decades, just going out and making new friends is not going to replace the person who you've lost. But I guess it's a stepping stone in the right direction to stop the spiral of loneliness, because I kind of sense from what you said, David, that it's natural to experience the red light feeling of loneliness when we're in a situation of unfamiliarity,
Yes.
when we want to be with people, but we can't be with people. And it's almost like at that point, we then have a choice. We can either push through, as you say, push through the kind of discomfort zone and start reaching out, start making connections, whether they're online connections, real life connections, new friends, new potential relationships. Or we can further contract in on ourselves, which then almost makes the downward spiral worse for the loneliness and hardest to get out of. It's almost like we kind of hit a fork in the road.
I think that's a really good point, and to analyze that point, we either, when we are in an unfamiliar situation, the part of the mind that we call the inner child will create a red light feeling because they're uncomfortable. That could be called loneliness. Now, you have two choices. You either understand what's going on, and I think that's the correct way of doing it. That's the teaching. Don't react to your emotions. Understand that you create the emotion. Understand why you're creating the emotion. As the example that you use is a wonderful example, extremely difficult, because if you've lost a long-time partner, not only are you now on your own, but there is also the emotion of grief to deal with. And so it can be very confusing. That's why doing the golden thread process and going back to understand what your beliefs are. And then, as Alex says, you have two choices. You either have to take a big, deep breath, drop your shoulders, look forward, and work through that emotion and make your new circumstances more familiar, or you become consumed. And the emotions then act in a way to kind of block you down. It's almost like a pressure, and you retreat and you retreat and you retreat back into your kind of what you perceive to be safety, but it actually is not safe. And there's the Wu Wei teaching. You have to understand that you are the creator of your emotions. So loneliness and wanting people and relationships, you have to have a relationship with yourself. We've done a series on love and relationships, and I always say for any relationship, for anybody else, first, and here's the Wu Wei teaching, you have to have a relationship with yourself. And I think for me, my experiences in China, that was the thing that I learned the most, to really have a relationship with yourself, to be at peace with yourself, to be at one with yourself, to be able to walk into a new environment with new people, in my case, that didn't even speak my language and I didn't speak their language, and be able to walk in there connected and as one, not having this inner turmoil and fight, this tug of war that we talk about.
I would think, David, just picking up on what you've just said, if we find ourselves in a situation where we are alone and we don't wish to be alone, it can really highlight for a lot of people perhaps their codependency, that the relationships they had before, whether it's friendships or with a partner, husband or wife, was a very kind of strongly bonded codependent relationship. And that although the codependency may have worked to the degree that the relationship worked while it was going on, once that relationship is over for whatever reason, it's almost like, because we've been codependent, on the other person for love or validation or support, that it highlights almost like a huge void within us, within our belief system, within our relationship with ourselves, as you just said.
Yes, exactly, Alex, and that's why it's very personal for every person. So the first thing when I'm going through this with a client and we're talking about self-sufficiency, being accountable, making that connection with yourself, the inner child will swing right out the other side and say, well, I need people around me, and I need, no man is an island. One client said to me, no man is an island. And I said, well, I never said that. I'm saying you have to start with yourself first. You have to have that relationship with yourself first. Before you enter into any other relationship, you have to have that relationship with yourself first. And then you can enter into other relationships. I'm just working with a client now where their long-term marriage has come to an end. And he's in his own house now. He says he comes home, the house is empty. He has to make his own tea, blow on, and so on and so on. And this is what we're talking about now with him, is please take this and look at this as an opportunity. Don't go racing around for the first potential partner and shoehorning them in because you're needy. Don't be needy. Take this as an opportunity now to work on yourself, to find out the things that you really enjoy. And you know what he said to me? I don't know what I enjoy. I've kind of lost myself in the marriage and the children and the mortgage and the payments. And I said, well, this is your opportunity now. We are not saying you're going to be on your own for the rest of your life. That's the last thing we're saying. But we're saying right now, before you enter into a relationship with someone else, let's get a good relationship with yourself. So when you meet someone else, you're not needy or codependent. You are already whole and in what I call oneness. You are already connected. And so if you, with his client, if he now really badly thinks he needs another lady, he needs a woman in his life, he can't function without a woman, it's almost certain he's going to pick the wrong person because they're coming together as though he's an injured party. And so we're working on taking this opportunity, making sure now he builds up himself, he builds up his connection and his relationship with himself. He starts to find out and reinvent what he is and what he stands for and what his values are. And so hopefully in 6 months' time or a year's time, when he goes out and starts to date, he's more balanced. He's more in Wu Wei. He's more in his flow. And so therefore, as you know, I believe in the law of attraction. He's more likely to attract a similar partner. Because if he goes out looking for partners now as he said, this broken person, this needy person, just ask yourself, what kind of partner is he going to attract? And so we're spending our time now taking this, seeing it as an opportunity, kind of re-establishing himself, making himself whole, looking at himself, asking those questions, looking within, and making that energy of who he is built on a solid foundation. So when he moves out, he's more confident, he's more assured, he's more centered, and he's not kind of searching and needing and wanting and looking like a victim. Because if you look like a victim, you know what you'll get. Someone who's looking to look for a victim, and that doesn't build for a very good relationship.
And so this idea of that your client's working on himself now, getting to grips with what he's about, what he truly wants, what his life goals are, developing kind of self-love for himself rather than automatically rushing to seek for the familiarity of a new relationship as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Does that kind of inner work, that self-work process, naturally then appease the feelings of loneliness? Does it actually reduce them even in the short term while you're doing that work, building that connection with yourself?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because he came to me talking about loneliness, and we've had, I think, 2 or 3 sessions. And now we very rarely talk about the feeling of loneliness. Now what he's talking about, I'll just, because I won't tell you his name, he's gone back horse riding. He's never ridden a horse since he was a child. He always had this memory of loving horses, and when he met his wife and they got married, they didn't have time. So now he goes horse riding 3 times a week. Now you see, now we're not even talking about the feeling of loneliness. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, because he's changed his belief, he's changed his mindset. He's now doing something constructive. So in a way, that feeling that he was creating, when you change what you're doing, that feeling just is no longer existent, because now he's talking about, okay, well, that's good. Now, what else can I do? What else? Well, and this is what he said to me. I've been looking for holidays in Spain where we can horse ride. And now I found this thing where strangers come together. Now you see it's a different...
And so there's the momentum, there's the energy. It's like if you just take that little step forward down that fork in the road we talked about, pushing out a little bit, rather than taking the fork in the road that rushes towards the familiar and amplifying the feelings of loneliness. There is an energetic momentum to project him forward.
Well, if you go back to the basic teaching and the life lesson in this teaching, is if you accept that you create the feelings, then you are creating loneliness. That is a feeling. You are creating it. Do the golden thread process. Go back to what the beliefs and the thoughts are, and then that's where you need to do the work. You need to change those beliefs and thoughts. Like the example I'm giving with my clients. Before, when he come, and our first session was all about basically, poo me, I'm on my own now, I'm coming back to an empty house, I've got nothing to look forward to, my life, I only see my children at the weekend, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. So we talked, and now we're talking about going on holiday to Spain, doing something else, meeting new people, having the same interest. So now that's just a very simple example. But when you change your belief system, then the emotions change. And this is where it goes wrong. People focus on the emotion instead of focusing on what is creating them. Remember, the emotion is always the consequence of what you think and what you believe. So you have to focus down on what you think and what you believe. And do you want to change that? You may not want to change that, but at least that empowers you to take responsibility and to become self-sufficient.
And I like the idea that, we can use if we acknowledge the feeling that, yes, I have a red light feeling here, I'm going to label it loneliness because of my circumstances. We can use that red light feeling as a positive springboard to know that something's not right here. We need to take action.
Yeah.
So it's a natural feeling. It's a natural consequence, as you say, of what you think and what you believe. But we can then run with it in a positive way, which then, as you say, will project you forward in life. project you forward to new things, different things, not necessarily better things, not necessarily worse things, but different things. At least there is a momentum going on.
Well, it changes the focus, Alex, and this is why it's a kind of a challenging subject to talk about, because each one of you will have a slightly different variation. So I'm just trying to give you the core. And the core way to look at it is loneliness is an emotional feeling. When you say, I feel lonely, you are creating that feeling. Then I would prefer you to call it a red light, as I've said on many videos, because the word loneliness starts to create an energetic in your head, and you start to see yourself as a lonely person. And then you may start to isolate yourself, and then you may start to pull away and come consumed by your emotions. So that's why I would prefer you not to use the word loneliness, but to say, I am currently creating a red light feeling because I have no friends. Then you can go back and say, why have I no friends? Well, I've just moved to a new area. I don't speak the language. I don't know these people. I'm in a new country. Then you can start asking yourself the real life lesson. So what do I do to change that? Because if you keep on being consumed by your emotions, you are the victim of those emotions. You view yourself as the victim, and you use words that are very victim to you, and you become consumed. My client, I've just given you the thing, he was consumed his whole life. He painted me these pictures I gave to you, coming back to an empty house. It's cold. There's nothing happening. There's no smell of food. I have to get takeaways. Poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me. So what he's saying is his life now, he sees no future. He's got no future. 3 or 4 sessions later, I don't quite know how many we've done. Now he's telling me, oh, I'm just booking a holiday to Spain.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's 12 people that I don't know. It's totally because we understood what the problem was. It was very difficult for him because he just wants to talk about feelings. And then we can address the problem. What would you like to do? What is it your passion? He said, oh, I've got no passion. I've got no. Well, what did you used to like? Well, I kind of liked horse riding as when I was a teenager. Okay, well, why don't you go horse riding? Oh, I'm too old to horse ride. No, you're not too old to horse. And you just have to get that first bit of movement.
Yeah. And I think I kind of get a strong sense here that it's almost like we have to convince our inner child that we cannot. It's almost like our inner child, as you say, wants to stick with the familiar, wants to recreate the familiar. The inner child perhaps doesn't accept what has happened. So whether it's death of a partner leaving us, moving location, there's a lack of acceptance somehow from the inner child, which keeps us stuck in the red light emotion of loneliness. But once we can almost convince the inner child to trust us that this will be a new adventure, we'll do it step by step by step, but that we need to push out of our normal familiar comfort zone a little bit, then the inner child starts to trust, the inner child starts to enjoy the new explorations and experiences.
So there's 2 things there, Alex, it's worth just saying. The part of the mind that we're labeling the inner child absolutely dislikes the unknown as much as a vampire dislikes garlic, if that's true. It dislikes the unknown. So it will always want to shut itself down. It will always want to put up this barrier protection. That's the one thing. So that's what you're trying to change. A little technique that I've learned, and see if it works for you, I did it on this client, is to look back and see if you can remember something in your childhood or teenage years that you enjoyed. It could be walking, it could be hiking, cycling, for this gentleman, horse riding, doing art, traveling, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Motorsports, whatever you want to do. And then what that does for that part of your mind, it doesn't give it the unknown. It kind of remembers, you see. So it goes, oh, horse riding. Yeah. Now it'll give you a little resistance, like my client did. Oh, I'm too old to horse ride. No, I say, you're not too old to horse ride. Oh, aren't I? No, just phone up a stables and ask them, if you can get reacquainted. Well, actually, he did. He phoned up the stables. That's the bit of an uncomfortableness. He went there, and when he came back to me the following 2 weeks, he said, you know what surprised me the most? He said, it was like I'd never left it.
Yeah.
And now his inner child now is accepting
Happy
that.
and playful.
I like this. Now the inner child, that's more comfortable, you see. Then you can build on that. Then he starts to speak to people at the stables. And as I say, I think he's booked a holiday now. He's going on holiday. He's going to meet 12 brand new people. We've never talked about loneliness since. We don't talk about that word because he's now not creating that feeling. And that's the difference. He's changed. So the loneliness feeling is a consequence of what you think and what you believe.
And I'm wondering, David, for everyone listening to this, in very different personal circumstances, as we said, how important is it when we're pushing out, trying to manage our loneliness or manage our thoughts and beliefs and try new things? How important is it to manage our self-talk? Because I would think our inner child would have a tendency, as you said with your client, I'm not going to be good at this, or these people aren't going to be as good as the friends I've left, or this person isn't going to be as wonderful as my ex-partner. The inner child is always kind of hanging on to the memory of what was and anchoring you to that, which I would imagine if you're not careful, that can then anchor you also to the red light feelings of loneliness.
Well, that's so true, Alex. And for those of you who follow us like regularly, you know I believe that inner voice is the voice of the inner child. That inner critic, that inner poo me, it never change. We're in problems here. Might as well shut ourselves down. That's the voice of your inner child. And we've done so many teachings on this. Please, if you can hear that inner voice and you living your life negatively from that inner voice of what you can't do and what's going to go wrong and worst case scenarios and looking at the worst case, please look back at some of our teachings. The ones I particularly would like you to look at is reparenting your inner child, because that's the relationship when I talked about earlier. Before you can have a successful relationship with someone else, you have to have a successful relationship with yourself. And that successful relationship is what I would call with the inner child. And when you hear, as Alex says, that negative 3 a.m. self-talk, you're too fat, you're too old, you're too tall, you're too small, whatever it is, then that's the voice that you have to reparent. And you have so much resources here on this channel. Look back in the teachings and go through it. You can join our Facebook community. I think there's over 5,000 members now. And you can share, and lots of people there are going through the same as you. And that's a way, if this feeling of loneliness is something that you're encountering, join our Facebook community and just put on there. And lots of people will share, they've been through it, they'll share their techniques that you might be able to cherry pick some ideas. But this can change when you change your thoughts and, more importantly, your beliefs.
Thank you, David. Well, I hope you have found this teaching inspirational, maybe just giving you some insight and a new perspective on understanding and managing your feelings of loneliness. As David mentioned, we've got so many more teachings on reparenting the inner child, understanding your emotions, cultivating self-love. So I will put links to those in the show notes, so please do check them out. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please do let us know and perhaps share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works every week with clients all over the world by Zoom video call on exactly these sorts of issues. And if you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one consultations, I will also put a link in the show notes to those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.